Welcome, IT changemakers, to the DEX Show with Tim Flower and Tom McGraw. Let's get into it.
Hello, changemakers. Welcome to the DEX Show. I'm Tom McGraw, joined as ever by Tim Flower. Tim, how you doing on this sunny Friday afternoon?
Yeah, it's sunny, Tom. Just finished up a 4-week tour of the U.S., got out to Texas and Tucson and Philly and Boston. It's good to be home. It is nice and sunny here. I heard it is sunny over there, too, for you finally, huh?
It's delightful. Well, I hope you did that tour of the U.S. on foot, Tim, because it is another green episode today. We've obviously had a green IT tier test before, which you came out quite middling on, if I recall. We had the green IT quiz, which you came out middling on again. But, you know, I've always felt that you've been at least very candid about your green IT habits, and they've been pretty good. But we're not going to leave it to chance today, because we have a very special guest, Lubomila Jordanova. She's the co-founder and CEO of Plan A. That's a Berlin-based startup that's developing an end-to-end platform to enable companies to really accurately measure, monitor, and reduce their environmental footprint and improve their ESG performance. So we're going to know in cold, hard facts, perhaps, Tim, how green you really are. Welcome to the show, Lubomila. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is our pleasure. Would love to start at the beginning for our interview today, if that's okay, and really know about when you first remembered hearing about the issue of the climate crisis and how your interest really developed and evolved from that point.
My love for the planet has always been there, especially when it comes to my passion for wildlife. But actually, in my professional life, I've never involved myself in anything related to climate change. I was in finance, then also moved in technology. And ultimately what happened in 2016 was I found myself on a beach in Morocco, where instead of surfing, I ended up cleaning the beach from plastic. And this was the event that essentially kicked off my engagement with the topic, because after this trip, I was absolutely obsessed of finding out what was really that humans were doing to essentially influence negatively the health of our planet. And that kind of went for a bit longer than expected, which is bringing me to the moment of today, 5 years down the line. The year after this serendipitous trip, I essentially quit my job after knowing way too much.
Wow. Well, how long did it take to clean the beach?
No, it was less than a year. I took an hour, I guess, to collect like around 8 bags. There's a lot of different little pieces of evidence of human existence, pieces of clothes, construction site materials, shoes, plastic, packaging from food. And ultimately, after this day, I was chatting to a lot of people, went back to London where I was living at that time, and educated myself really on what was going on.
Wow, amazing. And so tell us a bit about Plan A. Tell us about the mission, the origins, and its present day focus.
Plan A is a software as a service platform that enables businesses to reduce their emissions and learn also how they can improve their ESG performance. We have, since day one in 2017, worked at the trajectory between science and technology, where we combine a lot of scientific knowledge, a lot of methodologies, and use them as the foundation of a product that then enables businesses really to have an overview of their impact on the planet, and obviously, of course, the opportunity on them to improve this impact. We also enable them to report. As you know, there's a lot of legislation at the moment, which kind of requires businesses to have this structured approach to gathering data, putting it into a certain format, and then eventually acting on it.
That's outstanding, Lubomila. So looking at your work and obviously talking with you today, it's really clear that this is not just a mission for you, that it's a passion, right? And you feel, I think what a lot of people feel, including Tom and myself, some degree of exasperation about the fact that there's just talk and little action, and you've found a way to actually go take that action. Plan A is obviously about achieving the achievable, right? Setting the goals and actually making a difference and working with organizations rather than just condemning the whole system. Talk about that balance between just activism and talk and a sustainability endeavor that you're on right now.
For myself, I've chosen the part of building a business around this problem because this is, first of all, where my skill set lies. Second of all, this is also where I feel most confident any result can be a positive one, and any piece of education can lead to an action when it comes to how you interact with businesses. I think we have gone through quite a few years of learning as a society. There's been a lot of talk about climate change. There's been a lot of protests. There's been a lot of engagement on many levels, even political. And the format that for me has worked most effectively is the business one. There's 3 reasons for that. First of all, businesses have a lot of capital. They can push this capital to go towards good causes. And if they have the right values in mind and, of course, really clear on what greenwashing is and know how to avoid it, they really can move the needle on a lot of these processes and also even legislation implementations. The second bit is that businesses have a lot of people to influence. On one side is the consumers, on the other side is the employees. And this conversation, this engagement is two-sided. In the same way that employees and consumers can push the businesses to become more sustainable, so can businesses change the minds of their stakeholders. This is incredibly powerful because we need these masses, we need these groups of people to be engaged and to be thinking about this topic on a daily basis. And the final one, which is maybe not so obvious for people not involved in the finance industry, is the financial loss associated to not taking action today. Businesses are actually the first that are going to bear the costs of climate risk, be it because of unintended capex, be it because of infrastructure destruction. And for this reason, it is really important for them to be prepared.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And actually, I came across a quote from you saying, building with the planet and sustainability in mind is the only way to sustain competitive position. Can you unpack maybe a little bit more about how competitive position is going to be imperiled if businesses aren't really forthright in this direction across, say, the next 5 years? What are the real costs and consequences going to look like?
I've been investigating over the last few months the topic of greenwashing. As you know, at the moment, you can take a company that is focused on sustainability, maybe a bit more superficially, where they tell really wonderful stories, and unfortunately still compare them to a company that has developed the most detailed ESG sustainability strategy. Where the risk for the company of the first type lies is the fact that, first of all, people are becoming, as individuals, in the context of consumers, a lot more educated. So by you claiming something that is not backed by science, you're very likely to get yourself into an uncomfortable discussion. And there's a multitude of examples only from the last few weeks, especially in the US, that have been made prominent, that destroy brand equity and also lead to people switching to a more sustainable option. The second loss element, which is very tangible and is related to the bottom line of a business, is the one focused on employees. At the moment, you take a company that, let's say, makes shoes or makes bottles of water. Anyone that is passionate about this particular industry can find the same company, most likely producing the same kind of product, but with a sustainable angle and sustainable engagement for the employees. What do you think an employee that is looking into their own concerns for their family, for the generations ahead, going to pick? All of the money that you've invested into this employee to train them, to prepare them to be your next leader are gone, and they're going to be gone to your competitor. And this is really tangible. And there's been so many different protests and communities engaging and kicking off a lot of fights with their employers because they don't feel like they're being protected for what's ahead of them. And then the final one, which is, I think, one incredibly prominent in the European Union and in the UK, but certainly is one which the latest SEC announcement gives a kind of a little clue that will be prominent in the US as well. That is the one of regulatory frameworks that are shifting. At the moment, you have, just over the last few months, more than 40 new regulations that came in place in the European Union, a dozen in the UK, and then SEC just 2 weeks ago announced that they're going to embed carbon accounting into the reporting of businesses. If you don't start thinking about this topic in a more fundamental way, you are likely to be the one that kind of either ticks off the box but makes a lot of mistakes along the way because you're not educated on it, and gets the penalties, because in Europe there's a lot of penalties involved in any misreporting or any kind of greenwashing that was intended, unintended.
Fascinating. Actually, as a technologist and entrepreneur, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the dynamic between technology and business on the one hand and the climate crisis on the other. Could we unpick a little bit the complications here? First of all, a lot of people such as Plan A, they're harnessing technology to counteract environmental damage. On the other hand, it is largely a problem born of technology. So what can technology do and where are its limits in your view?
I always give the example of the carbon capture industry, which at the moment in the biggest facility that exists out there is at the capacity of 900 cars a year compensation. Just last year, India introduced to its own market more than 1 million cars on the roads. So that gives us a bit of a context of how far is technology to save us when it comes to climate change and enable humanity to be able to survive. Technology has a few parts to play in the journey ahead and has been playing in the last few years. First one is related to optimization of resources, waste elimination, energy storage, all of these different angles that we would need and we need already today at scale in order to be able to become a lot better at using our resources, which, as we know just from a few days ago, coming on average to 1.7 Earths a year. There was the overshoot day, which calculates how much resources do we use against how much the Earth is able to give us. The US, for example, is using 5 Earths a year, which is a lot. The second part that technology has to play, and for me, this is something that is incredibly dear to my heart, is education. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there, so that doesn't always play the part. But if used wisely and in the right manner, technology can offer a lot of democratization of knowledge related to climate change, related to any kind of issue that humanity faces or wants to address. And then as a third pillar, I would add the fact that we can use the knowledge that is out there sitting within science for collective action through technology. That is not necessarily only the activism bit. That is also a software like ours, where we engage organizations and different departments within it to act towards the same strategy, towards the same sustainable goal. I want to, however, close off with the fact that sustainability is not going to be addressed at scale purely by technology. And that is because of this example I gave in the beginning. We need people to have a mindset shift. And this is the most complicated bit that no technology is going to be able to address. And that is something that no technology, the fanciest technology, is never going to be able to offer us as a solution to all of the ills that we have in our society.
So Tom and I talk a lot with guests on the show about how impactful not just IT as technology, but IT as an organization within an enterprise can actually be in reducing your carbon footprint, right? You've got to identify what influences or what is impacting your carbon utilization and then change how people think. The knowledge and education and awareness go a long way to changing how people behave. What are your thoughts on how an IT organization can actually foster a more responsible tech usage with the employees rather than the IT teams themselves?
The first step, of course, is the assessment. At the moment, majority of companies have not even gone through the process to understand the status quo. So they have no understanding of what are the biggest levers for improvement. After this is done, after a company has an overview of its carbon footprint, waste, anything related to water consumption, you can start prioritizing. And the way we do it within our software is based on the low-hanging fruit first and then moving on to the more fundamental systemic shifts that need to happen. The reason for this is quite obvious. We need to be able to act as fast as possible. And also we need to be able to act in the most also cost-efficient manner for a business. What is most exciting, and this addresses your question, Tim, is the fact that there is an unlimited benefit to businesses kicking off this journey in terms of the engagement that they can achieve with their employees. Because a lot of the levers, especially for tech organizations related to decarbonization, involve a better and more sustainable mindset within the company. That is the way certain policies related to travel are applied. That is the way maybe the selection in terms of procurement is made within certain departments. That is also related to the way the company celebrates, the way the company onboards people, the way the company selects the technology that it uses. All of these things are actually incredibly easy to implement as long as there's will.
in IT and technology, we talk a lot about devices under management, and in finance, your background as well, there's assets under management. Is that what kind of the genesis of carbon under management came from? Is that where, talk a little bit about where that term came from?
When you talk about the carbon footprint of a business, maybe it's useful to explain that there's 3 layers of that. You have Scope 1, these are the facilities and the vehicles of a company. Scope 2, this is the services such as heating, cooling, electricity. And then you have Scope 3, and that's where you have all the suppliers, all the investments. This is also the travel, the commute, the end of use of a certain product. Historically, businesses have always thought, and this is also how reporting has structured it in the past, about emissions under management as only these like layers related to your facilities, your vehicles. But if you start thinking about like an automotive company or a fashion company, you obviously have a lot more burden that is embedded into the production of the physical product that you have. And in the context of a financial institution, this is specifically related to who you give your money to, and how responsible they are towards the planet and also towards like the social and governance elements. So this framework came about as a concept established by the GHG protocol. This is essentially a scientific piece of work that is now internationally accepted as the way we look into this particular topic. There's no way of which, in which like you can go about and calculate it differently. The only thing that differs is level of accuracy based on the data availability. What we focus on in Plan A is really going as granular as possible. That's why we use a lot of different methods that get really deep up until the activity data level.
That's great. And actually, to admit, Lubomila, I follow you on LinkedIn quite closely. It's a very interesting account. And I know that you've attended virtually or in person some really remarkable events over the last 12 months, from COP26 to the Munich Security Conference. Could I just ask, what has been your overall takeaway from mingling in these political and corporate elites around this time?
Thank you so much for this wonderful question, Tom. I think it's an important one to tackle because sometimes there's a bit of a misconception in society about who is doing what in this particular time for the climate crisis. I can definitely confirm that there's a lot of panic out there related to climate change, because the truth is that as much as science is quite elaborate, people in these high positions, not scientists, so they're also catching up and maturing their understanding of the problems. On the other hand, though, I can definitely confirm that there's still a lot of misunderstanding between the different stakeholders of what role they need to play. And there's often cases where you see a different language being spoken in the boardroom versus in a political context versus in a context of employees, versus maybe people that are just consumers, like each one of us, essentially, at the end of the day, after we have taken off the work hat. This is really problematic, and this is where I always spend my time and effort into unifying the way people speak about the issues, because ultimately we're running mini sprints in totally different directions rather than running a marathon altogether. This is going to be a long journey. It's one where we're looking into transforming our whole economy. And why it's important for us to understand this today is because we have a short amount of time. That is not to create panic. I'm not panicked, and I work with this on a daily basis. It is more to understand that we're going to be dissatisfied with the result if we continue being constantly like picking out little pieces of action that just don't match with the rest of the stakeholders' actions.
A lot of the most interesting insights and takeaways from an in-person conference like that can be the things that are off the agenda, right? The interesting conversations, the experiences that you have with people that are outside of the formal things that are going on. Any interesting anecdotes, nameless, faceless stories you can relate to folks listening?
Absolutely. I think the best example, Tim, has been from COP26. COP26, for those of the listeners maybe not familiar, is the biggest gathering on climate change internationally. It first started as a governmental affair, but in the last few years it started inviting a lot of private actors, purely for the fact that there's at least an understanding that all the stakeholders need to gather. I'm still standing behind my statement that the language is still misaligned, but still these people gather in the same room for 2 weeks thanks to this event. What happened last year in Glasgow was absolutely extraordinary. I've never felt in my life so empowered. It was like I was in a theme park in the most like positive way, like a little child that it was surrounded by all these opportunities for happiness and excitement. And when I came back, I was confronted with a reality where people were like, oh my God, you must be devastated. You must be feeling so bad about the outcome. You know, they said phase out, but then they said it phase down. How do you feel about this? And ultimately what this was to demonstrate was that the way our reality unfolds is not the way the rest of society that was not part of this moment where reality was being shaped understands it. I wouldn't blame it only on the press or only on maybe stories that were being told by activists or any other stakeholder that maybe was on the opinion that this was a massive failure. But having been there, someone that is, I would comfortably say, really informed on the topic, I really felt for the first time incredibly empowered by the fact that there were so many people that allowed me to go to bed and know that at the same time, someone is awake and is doing the work that needs to be done. There was indigenous people, there was businesses, there was also the oil companies. I didn't interact with them. There was a lot of them, but there was just so much momentum. And if you work normally in your day to day, like I am, and I'm lucky to have the Greentech Alliance where I constantly communicate to 2,000 businesses that are building technology against climate change. But if you're someone that works in isolation of these opportunities and you're only reading the press or you're only informing yourself by some negative ideas, you might feel quite disheartened and you might feel quite lonely. That was an example of how there could be a few versions of reality, and we probably should focus on really pushing the solution that we can contribute to rather than maybe kind of whatever story has been told.
That's a very heartening note, Lubomila, and maybe another optimistic question for you to answer is that if you could implement one policy that every country in the world would volitionally commit to implementing tomorrow around climate overnight, what would it be?
It might sound a bit qualitative, but to me, the biggest issue that we have at the moment related to climate change is there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of misalignment in the way facts are being treated. Scientists go deep and they release these 30,000 page reports like the IPCC report. But then this gets to be distilled in a one-page article on Bloomberg and supposedly you figured out what the story is. I would love to be able to make it mandatory for everyone to go through like a few-week course on climate change. I do think it requires that amount of time just for people to understand the cost implications on their business. I think at the moment there's still a massive misconception about what is our economy versus climate change and how do you blend these two together. The only reason why I'm using the currency of money is because I know that this works in the minds of many. And if we do a course that is educational related to how much money we're going to be losing as we've been doing for the last few years because of natural disasters that are increasing in frequency and speed because of climate change, because of human loss, because of this disengagement of employees, customers, people are going to start to realize that the only way forward for their business to really be successful would be if they actually were to take a stance on this particular big chunk of issues.
Fascinating proposal, Lubomila. Thank you so much for joining us today. An absolute pleasure talking to you. And I will just direct all of our listeners who would like to read more about the sort of intersection between climate and technology and IT to please head over to our DEX show, DEX Hub mothership. You find the link in the show notes. Lubomila, thank you. Is there any way you would like people to seek you out and follow you and your work?
I would love for anyone that is interested in what I've said to connect. We have a lot of open positions in Plan A internationally. We also have a lot of opportunities for engagement through events, through, of course, our software for businesses. So anyone that wants to reach out, they can find me on LinkedIn. And thank you so much for having me. This was a really pleasant discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
To make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. If you'd like to learn more about how NextThink can help you improve your digital employee experience, head over to nextthink.com. Thank you so much for listening.